Family is the anchor we cling to until a hidden truth rips it away. This is a story of love, secrets, and a man questioning who he is when the father he knew wasn't his. My name is Daniel, 50, a carpenter living in a small coastal town in Maine. My hands are calloused from years of shaping wood, just like my dad taught me. His name was Thomas, but I called him Dad, and he was my world, growing up. It was just the two of us after Mom died when I was 6. Breast cancer took her fast, and I don't remember much about her except her soft voice singing me to sleep. Dad was the one who raised me, who showed me how to swing a hammer, plane a board, and build something that lasts. He wasn't perfect, gruff, stubborn, quiet most days, but he was steady, the kind of man who'd sit with you in silence when you were hurting, not pushing you to talk, just there. I thought I knew everything about him, about us. I thought we shared blood, values, history. Turns out, I was wrong about the blood part. Dad passed 3 months ago, heart attack, sudden and merciless. He was 78, still working part-time at the shop, still showing up to fix a neighbor's porch or carve a toy for their kid. His funeral was small, just me, some folks from town, and a few old customers who'd known him forever. I stood by his casket, trying to sum up his life in a eulogy, but words felt too small. How do you capture a man who was your whole family? I didn't cry. Dad wouldn't have wanted that. But my chest felt like it was caving in. I thought that was the worst pain I'd ever feel. Then came the letter. It was after the service, when most people had left the church hall. A man I didn't know, maybe in his 60s, approached me. He was thin, with a nervous twitch in his hands, and he handed me an envelope. "Your father asked me to give this to you," he said, barely meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry." Before I could ask who he was or why Dad trusted him with this, he was gone, slipping out into the Maine drizzle. The envelope was plain, my name scrawled in Dad's shaky handwriting. I stuffed it in my pocket, figuring I'd read it later when I wasn't drowning in grief. That night, alone in my workshop, I opened it. The letter was short, but it hit like a sledgehammer. Dad wrote that he wasn't my biological father. Mom had an affair early in their marriage. Before I was born, he found out when she was pregnant, but he never told her he knew. He chose to raise me as his own, to love me like I was his blood, because to him, I was. He said he kept it secret to protect me, to give me a life without questions. He ended the letter with, "You're my son, Daniel. No matter what, I hope you can forgive me." Forgive him? I didn't know what to feel: anger, betrayal, grief, or something I couldn't name. My whole life, I thought I was his. Now I wasn't sure who I was. I sat there, staring at the letter, the words blurring as my hand shook. The workshop smelled of sawdust and varnish, smells that always meant Dad, but now they felt like they belonged to someone else's life. I wanted to call him, to yell, to ask why he didn't tell me sooner, but he was gone, and I was alone with this truth. The next day, I drove to a lab in Portland and got a DNA test, just to be sure. 2 weeks later, the results confirmed it. No biological match to the man I call Dad. They even traced some distant relative, a cousin of my real father, who died years ago in a car accident. I didn't care about him. He wasn't the one who raised me. That's when I started pulling away from the shop, from the town, from Dad's memory. Every board I cut, every nail I drove, reminded me of him, and it hurt too much. I stopped going to his grave, something I used to do every Sunday. I couldn't face it. Not when I didn't know who we were to each other anymore. I haven't told anyone, not my neighbors, not my buddies from the bar. How do you explain that your life's foundation was a lie? I keep working, keep moving, but it's like I'm swinging a hammer at nothing. The days after reading Dad's letter blurred into each other. I'd wake up, make coffee, and head to the workshop, but it wasn't the same. The tools felt heavy, like they belonged to someone else. I'd catch myself staring at a half-finished table, my hands idle. My mind stuck on that letter. Why didn't he tell me? That question gnawed at me, louder than the buzz of the saw. I wanted to believe he kept quiet to protect me, like he wrote, but it felt like a betrayal, not just of me, but of everything we were. He'd sit across from me at dinner, teaching me how to carve a dovetail joint, knowing I wasn't his by blood. How did he do it? How did he look at me and not see Mom's mistake? I started avoiding the shop when I could. I'd take long drives along the coast, the kind Dad and I used to do when I was a kid. Back then, we'd stop at some rocky beach, skip stones, and talk about nothing important: baseball, fishing, the weather. Now, I'd park and stare at the waves, trying to piece together who I was without him as my anchor. The DNA test had given me a name from my biological father, Michael something or other, but it meant nothing. He was a stranger, dead for a decade, and I didn't want to dig up his life. I didn't need another ghost haunting me. Work was the only thing keeping me sane, even if it felt hollow. I'd take any job, fixing a porch, building a bookshelf, anything to keep my hands busy. People in town noticed I was off, though. Mrs. Callahan, who'd known Dad forever, cornered me at the hardware store one day. "You look like you're carrying the world, Daniel," she said, her eyes soft. I mumbled something about missing Dad and got out of there fast. I couldn't tell her the truth. How do you say the man you all loved wasn't my real father? It wasn't just about me. It felt like I'd be tarnishing Dad's memory, and I couldn't do that. Not yet. At night, I'd sit in my living room, the TV on but ignored, and think about Mom. I barely remembered her face, just flashes, her laugh, her hands braiding her hair. Dad never talked about her much after she died, and I never pushed. Now I wondered if it was because of the affair. Did he resent her? Did he love her too much to confront her? I found an old photo album in the attic. When I hadn't looked at in years, there was a picture of them, young, smiling at some county fair. Dad had his arm around her, and she was leaning into him. They looked happy. Was that before or after she betrayed him? I slammed the album shut, my chest tight. I hated her a little, and I hated myself for it. I started dreaming about Dad, too. In one, we were in the workshop, building a chair like we used to. He was showing me how to sand the armrest, his hands steady. But when I looked up, his face was blank, like a stranger's. I'd wake up sweating, my heart pounding. I wanted to be angry at him, but I couldn't. He'd given me everything, a home, a trade, a name. But that name, Thomas, wasn't mine by blood, and it left me unmoored. I'd always been proud to be his son, to carry his legacy in every piece of furniture I built. Now, I didn't know what I was carrying. One day, I got a call from a guy named Paul, a friend of Dad's from his fishing days. He'd heard I was struggling and offered to buy me a beer. I almost said no, but I went. We sat at the bar, talking about nothing at first, boats, the Patriots, the price of lumber. Then he brought up Dad. "Thomas was proud of you. You know," he said. "Always said you were the best thing he ever did." I nodded, my throat tight, and changed the subject. I wanted to ask if he knew, if Dad ever hinted at the truth, but I didn't. I wasn't ready to hear that someone else carried my secret. Driving home that night, I passed the cemetery. I slowed down, staring at the gates. But I didn't stop. I hadn't been to Dad's grave since the funeral, and the guilt ate at me. I wanted to talk to him, to ask why he hid it. But I was scared of what I'd feel standing there. Instead, I kept driving, the road stretching into the dark, wondering if I'd ever feel like his son again. I kept moving through life like a ghost, doing just enough to get by. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. But every quiet moment brought the letter back. Dad's words looping in my head. "You're my son, no matter what." I wanted to believe him, but the truth was a splinter I couldn't pull out. It wasn't just that he wasn't my biological father. It was the silence, 50 years, and he never said a word. Did he think I couldn't handle it? Or was he protecting himself, keeping the perfect image of our family intact? I didn't know, and not knowing was worse than the truth itself. The workshop became a place I both needed and dreaded. I'd walk in, smell the pine and varnish, and see Dad everywhere, leaning over a workbench, squinting at a blueprint, wiping sweat off his brow. I'd taken over the business after he slowed down. But it was still his. Every tool, every shelf, had his mark. I was working on a dining table for a young couple in town, and I kept botching it. A mismeasured leg, a warped board. I'd never made so many mistakes. One afternoon, I threw a chisel across the room, denting the wall. I sat on the floor, head in my hands, and realized I wasn't just angry at Dad. I was angry at myself for letting this break me. I started digging through Dad's things, looking for answers. His house was mine now, but I hadn't touched much since he died. I'd walk through, expecting him to call out from the kitchen, offering me a coffee. Instead, it was just dust and memories in his bedroom. I found a locked box under the bed. It took me a week to work up the nerve to open it. Inside were letters, photos, and a journal. Most of the letters were from Mom, written before I was born. They were love letters, full of hope, talking about their dreams, their plans for a family. Reading them felt like intruding, but I couldn't stop. One letter, dated a month before Mom's pregnancy, was different. It was short, her handwriting shaky. "I'm sorry, Thomas. I don't know how to fix this." No details, no explanation, but I knew that was her confession, or as close as she got. Dad kept it all these years. The journal was harder to read. He didn't write much, just a few entries a year. One from when I was born said, "Daniel's here. He's perfect. I'll be his father, no matter what." Another, from when I was 10, read, "Taught Danny to fish today. He's got my stubborn streak. Makes me proud." My stubborn streak? I laughed, but it hurt. He saw me as his, even knowing the truth. Why couldn't I feel that now? I wanted to hate Mom for the affair, but the journal made it harder. Dad wrote about her after she died, how he missed her laugh, how he wished he'd told her he forgave her. He knew, and he still loved her. That broke me more than the letter. I started talking to Dad in my head, like he was still here. I'd be sanding a board and mutter, "Why didn't you trust me with this?" Or, "Did you ever want to tell me?" It was stupid, but it felt like the only way to keep him close. I still couldn't go to his grave, though. The idea of standing there, knowing he wasn't my blood, made my stomach twist. I'd drive by the cemetery, slow down, then keep going, cowardly, maybe. But I wasn't ready to face that stone with his name on it. People in town kept trying to pull me back. My buddy Jake, who ran the bait shop, invited me to poker night, but I blew him off. Mrs. Callahan sent me a casserole, which I ate cold over 3 days. Even the couple I was building the table for checked in, asking if I was okay. I lied, said I was fine, but I wasn't. I was unraveling, and the only thing holding me together was routine. I'd wake up, make coffee, work, and try not to think about the box under Dad's bed or the letter in my drawer. But at night, alone, it all came crashing back. I'd wonder who I was if I wasn't Thomas's son. Was I still Daniel, the carpenter who built things that lasted? Or was I just a lie he lived for 50 years? One evening, I found myself holding the phone, staring at the number for that cousin the DNA test linked me to. I didn't call, but I wanted to. Not to meet them, just to know if my real father was anything like me. Then I put the phone down. I wasn't ready for more truths. Not yet. I was drowning in questions, and the answers I had only made things worse. Dad's journal, Mom's letters. They were like puzzle pieces that didn't fit. I'd read them over and over, hoping for some clarity, but all I got was more confusion. How did Dad carry this for so long? How did he look at me every day, knowing I was the product of Mom's betrayal, and still call me his son? I wanted to admire him for it, but part of me resented him for the lie. It wasn't just about me. It was about him choosing to bury the truth, leaving me to dig it up alone. Work was barely holding me together. The dining table for that couple was finally done, but it was sloppy, not my best. When I delivered it, the wife, Sarah, noticed my hands shaking. "You sure you're okay, Daniel?" she asked, her voice gentle. I forced a smile, said something about long hours, and left before she could push. People in town were starting to talk. I could feel it. The guy who used to joke at the bar, who'd fix a fence for free, was gone. In his place was this quiet, hollow version of me, and I didn't know how to bring the old Daniel back. One morning, I found myself at the hardware store, staring at a rack of screws like they held the meaning of life. Jake, my buddy from the bait shop, walked in and clapped me on the shoulder. "You look like hell, man," he said, half laughing. I shrugged, not in the mood for his usual ribbing. He didn't let it go, though. "Come fishing with me this weekend. You need to get out of that shop." I wanted to say no, but something in his eyes, concern, maybe, made me agree. I hadn't been fishing since Dad died, and the thought of it hurt, but sitting alone hurt more. That Saturday, we went out on Jake's boat, the ocean calm and gray. It was the kind of day Dad loved, cold enough to see your breath, but not so bad you couldn't cast a line. Jake didn't push me to talk, which I appreciated. We just sat, rods in hand, the waves slapping the hull. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Your dad used to talk about you all the time out here, said you were tougher than he ever was." I froze, my line going slack. "Did he ever say anything weird about me?" I asked, my voice low. Jake frowned, thinking, "Nah, just that you were his kid through and through." "Why?" I shook my head, muttering, "Nothing." But my heart was racing. Did Jake know something? Or was Dad's secret really his alone? Back home, I couldn't shake the conversation. I pulled out the journal again, flipping to an entry from when I was in high school. Dad wrote about me getting into a fight, defending some kid who was being bullied. "Danny's got a good heart," he wrote. "Makes me think I did something right." I slammed the book shut, my eyes burning. He did everything right. Except tell me the truth. I wanted to scream at him, but I also wanted to thank him. It was tearing me apart, this mix of love and anger. I started avoiding the cemetery even more, but I couldn't avoid the town. Everywhere I went, someone had a story about Dad. How he helped them, how he'd laugh, how he'd talk about me. It made me feel like a fraud, like I was stealing his legacy by questioning it. One night, I got drunk at the bar, something I rarely did. Paul, Dad's old fishing buddy, was there, and I almost told him everything. The words were on my tongue. He wasn't my real dad, but I stopped myself. Instead, I asked, "Did Dad ever seem, I don't know, like he was hiding something?" Paul looked at me, his eyes sharp. "Thomas carried a lot, but he carried it for you," he said. "Don't go digging up what he buried." It was cryptic, and it shook me. Did Paul know? That night, I dreamed of Dad again. We were in the workshop, but this time, he was carving my name into a piece of wood. When I asked why, he just smiled and said, "So you'll remember who you are." I woke up crying, something I hadn't done since I was a kid. I wanted to believe I was still his son, but the letter, the DNA test, the truth, it was all too heavy. I needed to know more, not about my biological father, but about why Dad chose silence. I decided to track down the man who gave me the letter. Maybe he had answers. Maybe he knew why Dad waited until he was gone to break my world. Finding the man who gave me Dad's letter wasn't easy. I didn't have a name, just a vague memory of his face. Thin, nervous, maybe 60. I asked around town, starting with the church where the funeral was held. The pastor remembered him, said his name was Henry, a drifter who'd done odd jobs for Dad years ago. No last name, no address, just a rumor he was staying at a boarding house in Brunswick. I didn't know why I needed to find him, but something about his quick exit that day felt like a loose thread. If he knew Dad's secret, maybe he could tell me why Dad kept it until he was gone. I drove to Brunswick on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of day where the sky feels like it's pressing down on you. The boarding house was a sagging old place, paint peeling, with a porch that looked one storm away from collapsing. The woman at the desk, chewing gum like it was her job, barely looked up when I asked about Henry. "Left a month ago," she said. "Didn't say where." I pressed, describing him, mentioning Dad, but she just shrugged. I left my number in case he came back, but I wasn't hopeful. Driving home, I felt like I was chasing shadows. Why did I think one conversation would fix this? Back in the workshop, I tried to lose myself in work, but it was no use. I was building a bookshelf for the library, a big project Dad would have loved. I kept imagining him next to me, pointing out a crooked joint, telling me to slow down. But then I'd remember the letter, and it was like he vanished all over again. I started talking to him out loud, not just in my head. "Why'd you give the letter to some stranger, Dad?" I'd mutter, sanding a board too hard. "Why not tell me yourself?" The silence was worse than any answer could have been. I went back to the journal, hoping for something I'd missed. One entry caught me off guard. From when I was in my 20s, just starting the business, Dad wrote, "Danny's making a name for himself. Makes me feel like I left something good in this world." I had to stop reading, my throat tight. He thought I was his legacy, even knowing I wasn't his by blood. It made me wonder if I was betraying him by letting this truth eat me alive. Was I dishonoring everything he gave me by questioning who I was? The dreams kept coming. Two. In one, I was a kid again, sitting on Dad's lap while he carved a wooden boat. He was humming, something he rarely did, but when I looked at him, his eyes were sad, like he knew something I didn't. I woke up with my chest aching, the kind of pain that makes you feel like you're breaking apart. I started to wonder if I was angry at Dad or at myself for not being able to move past this. He chose me, didn't he? So why couldn't I choose him back? One night, I ran into Sarah, the woman from the dining table job, at the grocery store. She was buying apples, chatting about her kids, and then she paused. "You're not yourself, Daniel," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I know losing Thomas was hard, but this is something else." I wanted to brush it off, but her kindness cracked something in me. I mumbled about needing time and got out of there, but her words stuck. She was right. This wasn't just grief. It was like my whole life had been rewritten, and I didn't know the ending. I started thinking about Mom more, too. I'd spent so long blaming her for the affair, but I wondered what her side was. Did she love this other guy? Was it a mistake she regretted? Dad's journal didn't say, and her letters were too vague. I found myself wishing I could talk to her, even just once, to understand why she did it. But she was gone, and all I had was Dad's choice to raise me anyway. That choice was starting to feel like the only solid thing left, but it wasn't enough to fill the hole inside me. By the end of the week, I was back at the cemetery gates. I didn't go in, just sat in my truck, staring at the headstones through the rain. I wanted to stand at Dad's grave and feel like his son again, but I was scared I'd just feel like a stranger. I gripped the steering wheel, whispering, "I'm trying, Dad." But trying wasn't enough. I needed to know why he thought silence was better than the truth. I needed to find Henry. The search for Henry was a dead end, but it didn't stop me from obsessing. I'd lie awake at night, picturing his nervous hands, the way he couldn't look me in the eye when he handed me Dad's letter. He knew something, maybe everything, and I was starting to think he was my only shot at understanding why Dad kept the truth from me. I called the boarding house in Brunswick again, but the woman just snapped. "I told you he's gone." I even drove back, poking around bars and diners, asking if anyone knew a guy named Henry who worked odd jobs. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished into the Maine fog, leaving me with more questions than ever. The workshop was starting to feel like a trap. I'd walk in, see Dad's old toolbox, and feel my chest tighten. I was behind on the library bookshelf project, and the head librarian, Mrs. Ellis, called to check in. "We're not in a rush, Daniel," she said, her voice kind. "Just want it done right." I promised I'd finish soon, but I wasn't sure I believed myself. Every cut I made, every nail I hammered, felt like I was trying to rebuild something I couldn't name. I kept Dad's journal on the workbench now, open to that entry about me being his legacy. It was a reminder that he loved me, but it also hurt, because I didn't feel like anyone's legacy anymore. I started noticing things about myself that never bothered me before. My eyes, hazel like Mom's, not Dad's blue ones. The way I laughed, sharp and quick. Did that come from the other guy, Michael? I hated that I was looking for him in me, like I was betraying Dad just by wondering. One night, I pulled out the DNA test results again, staring at the name of that cousin they'd linked me to. I looked her up online, a woman named Clara in Boston. She had a LinkedIn page, some generic headshot, and I almost sent her a message. But what would I say? "Hi, I'm the son of your dead cousin, and my life's falling apart." I closed the laptop and poured a whiskey instead. Jake kept trying to pull me out of my head. He dragged me to another fishing trip, and this time, I talked a little, not about the letter, but about Dad. "He was always there, you know," I said, casting my line into the water. "Never let me down." Jake nodded, sipping his beer. "Thomas was solid. You're a lot like him." I wanted to laugh, to tell him I wasn't. Not really, but I just stared at the waves. Jake didn't know, and I wasn't ready to tell him, but his words stuck with me. Was I like Dad because he raised me, or was I just pretending to be? The dreams were getting worse. In one, I was at Dad's grave, but the headstone had my name on it, not his. I woke up gasping, my hands shaking so bad I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered on the kitchen floor, and I just sat there, staring at the pieces. That's what I felt like. Broken, scattered, impossible to put back together. I cleaned it up, but the whole time, I was thinking about Mom. I kept going back to her letter, the one where she apologized to Dad. "I don't know how to fix this," she wrote. I wondered if she meant the affair or me. Did she look at me and see her mistake? Did Dad? One evening, I ran into Paul at the bar again. He was quieter this time, nursing a beer, and I couldn't help myself. "Paul, did Dad ever talk about Mom cheating?" I blurted out. His eyes widened, and for a second, I thought I'd caught him off guard. Then he shook his head. Thomas didn't talk about that stuff. He loved her, and he loved you. That's all I know. I didn't believe him. There was something in his pause, like he was choosing his words too carefully. I pushed, but he changed the subject, talking about some fishing trip from years ago. I left the bar feeling like I'd missed something important. I went back to the cemetery that night, the first time I'd been there since the funeral. It was dark, the air cold and sharp. I stood at Dad's grave, staring at his name carved in stone. "Why'd you do it, Dad?" I whispered. "Why'd you let me think I was yours?" The wind answered, but he didn't. I felt empty, like I'd lost him twice. Once when he died, and once when I read that letter. I needed to know more, but Henry was gone, and Dad wasn't talking. All I had was myself. And I wasn't sure who that was anymore. Standing at Dad's grave that night didn't bring the peace I'd hoped for. The headstone was cold, final, and it didn't answer my questions. I drove home in silence, the weight of everything. Dad's letter, Mom's affair, my own unraveling, pressing down harder than ever. I was starting to realize this wasn't just about the truth. It was about what it meant to be his son. Did blood matter? Or was it the years of him teaching me, loving me, showing up? I wanted to believe the latter, but the hurt kept pulling me back to that letter, to the lie I'd lived for 50 years. The workshop was a mess now. Tools scattered, half-finished projects piling up. The library bookshelf was still incomplete, and Mrs. Ellis called again, her voice patient but edged with worry. "We're counting on you, Daniel," she said. I promised I'd get it done, but I was barely holding it together. Every time I picked up a hammer, I saw Dad's hands guiding mine, heard his voice saying, "Measure twice, cut once." Now, those memories felt tainted, like they belonged to a story I didn't fully understand. I started avoiding the shop altogether, taking on smaller jobs, fixing a door, patching a fence, anything that didn't remind me of him. I couldn't stop thinking about Paul's words at the bar. Don't go digging up what he buried. It stuck with me, like he was warning me off. Did he know about the affair? Had Dad told him? I wanted to confront him, but I didn't know how to ask without spilling everything. Instead, I went back to Dad's journal, reading entries I'd skipped before. One, from when I was 30, hit hard. Danny's struggling with the business. Told him to keep going. He's got more of me in him than he knows. More of him? I wanted to scream at the page. If he meant it, why didn't he tell me the truth? Why let me think I was his in every way? I started noticing how alone I was. No family left, no wife, no kids, just me and this secret. I'd never married, mostly because I was too busy with the shop, too focused on Dad and the life we built. Now, I wondered if I'd been hiding from something, too. Maybe I was more like him than I thought, keeping things buried. One night, I called Jake, not to talk about Dad, but just to hear a voice. We ended up at the diner, eating greasy burgers, and he started talking about his daughter, how she was applying to college. "You ever think about kids, Dan?" he asked. I shrugged, muttering something about it being too late. But the truth was, I'd always thought I'd pass on what Dad taught me. Carpentry, stubbornness, heart. Now, I didn't know what I had to pass on. The dreams were relentless. In one, I was in the workshop, but it was empty. Just me and Dad's letter floating in the air. I reached for it, but it turned to ash. I woke up with my heart pounding. The room too quiet. I started to wonder if I was losing it. If this secret was breaking me in ways I couldn't fix. I needed something to hold on to. So I went back to Dad's house, digging through more of his things. I found a photo of us from when I was a teenager, standing by a canoe we'd built. Together, we were grinning, covered in sawdust, and I could almost hear his laugh. I tucked the photo in my wallet, a small anchor to keep me from drifting too far. One day, out of nowhere, the boarding house in Brunswick called. The woman said Henry had come back, left an address in Portland. My hands shook as I wrote it down. This was it. My chance to get answers. I didn't know what I'd say, but I needed to know why Dad trusted him with the letter, what he knew about my real father. I drove to Portland that afternoon, the address leading to a rundown apartment building. I knocked, my heart in my throat, but no one answered. I left a note with my number, feeling like I was shouting into the void again. Back home, I sat in the dark, the photo of me and Dad in my hands. I wanted to feel like his son again, to believe his love was enough. But the truth kept pulling me under, and I didn't know how to fight it anymore. I wasn't sure if finding Henry would fix anything, but I had to try. I owed it to myself, and maybe to Dad. I waited days for Henry to call, checking my phone like it was my lifeline. Nothing. The note I left at his Portland apartment felt like another dead end, but I couldn't let it go. I needed to know why Dad chose him to deliver the letter. What he knew about my real father, about me. I kept working, kept moving, but it was like I was holding my breath, waiting for something to make sense. The workshop, once my sanctuary, was now just a reminder of what I'd lost, not just Dad, but the certainty of who I was. I finally finished the library bookshelf, delivering it to Mrs. Ellis with an apology for the delay. She didn't ask questions, just smiled and said, "It's beautiful, Daniel. Your father would be proud." Her words stung more than they soothed. Proud of what? A son who wasn't his? I nodded, muttered a thanks, and left before I could say something I'd regret. Back home, I pulled out the photo of me and Dad by the canoe, the one I'd tucked in my wallet. I stared at it, trying to remember how it felt to be that kid. The one who thought he had a father's blood running through him. I wanted to feel that again, but it was like chasing a shadow. Then, out of the blue, Henry called. His voice was rough, hesitant, like he was as nervous as I was. He agreed to meet at a diner in Portland, a greasy spoon with flickering lights. When I got there, he was already in a booth, nursing a coffee. He looked older than I remembered, his hands still twitchy, his eyes darting around. I sat down, my heart pounding, and cut to the chase. "Why Dad give you the letter?" I asked. Henry sighed, looking at his mug like it held the answers. "Thomas and I went way back," he said. "He helped me out when I was down, gave me work. A few years ago, he told me about you, about your mom's affair. Said he didn't want you to find out from anyone else." I leaned forward, my voice tight. "Why didn't he tell me himself?" Henry shook his head. He was scared. Scared you'd look at him differently, like he wasn't enough. He wrote that letter a dozen times, kept changing it. He trusted me to give it to you after he was gone because he couldn't face you knowing. I sat back, my chest aching. Dad was scared? The man who taught me to stand up to bullies, to keep going when things got hard? It didn't make sense, but it also did. He loved me enough to hide the truth, but not enough to trust me with it. Henry didn't know much about my biological father, just that he was a guy Mom met before she married Dad, someone who didn't stick around. "Thomas never hated him," Henry said. "He just wanted to be your dad." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. When I left the diner, I felt lighter, but not better. Henry's words gave me a piece of Dad I hadn't seen before, but they didn't fill the hole. I drove home, the photo of me and Dad on the dashboard. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel angry, just sad. That night, I went to the cemetery. It was late, the air sharp with autumn chill. I stood at Dad's grave, the headstone glowing faintly under the moonlight. "I get it now," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You were trying to protect me. But I needed you to trust me too." I didn't cry, but I felt something shift, like a knot loosening. I wasn't his by blood, but I was his in every way that mattered. Every lesson, every laugh, every quiet moment in the workshop that was real, even if the truth hurt. I went back to the workshop the next day, picking up where I'd left off. I started a new project, a small table for my own house, something simple but sturdy. As I worked, I felt Dad there not as a ghost, but as a memory I could carry without pain. I wasn't whole yet, but I was starting to believe I could be. The letter, the DNA test, Mom's affair, they didn't erase what Dad gave me. I was still Daniel, his son, not because of blood, but because of love, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep going.